All right, so we're almost ready to start our little mini project that's going to be due at the end of class on Friday. But before we talk about that, let's review where we are. You're going to be having to design a sampling method. So first of all, you're going to think about what population you want to look at and what kind of questions you might want to ask this population. And then you're going to decide on how to sample. Remember, we don't want to sample badly. We don't want to just ask our friends or people that are around us and get a convenience sample. That wouldn't be a good idea. And we don't want to just say, hey, give the sample to a bunch of people and say, respond if you want to. We want to definitely have a good sampling method where we're either going to use a simple random sample, a stratified sample, or a cluster sample. Okay, so think about that when you're deciding how you're going to select your sample. So some other things to take into consideration when you're actually writing your survey questions is undercoverage. Undercoverage could be something that occurs when some groups in the population are simply left out of the process. So this could happen if you choose to do a simple random sample, and let's say randomly only gentlemen were selected and there were no women in your survey results, in your sample. That could be a situation where you have undercoverage, and you might want to consider going back and doing that again. Another situation, this happens to me all the time, when you get to be an adult, you're going to start getting surveys in the mail, and non-response is a problem as well when you're selected to be in the sample and then you choose not to participate. So that's going to cause some skewed results. We also have a problem of response bias. And so if your question is something that's illegal or maybe an unpopular behavior, you might have people that lie. And we noticed that response bias definitely happened in the Trump campaign. People were asked questions about whether or not they liked Donald Trump, and in the surveys, it looked like Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. But because of a lot of response bias that at the time it might have been not seen as very popular to like Donald Trump, people were actually lying to the surveyors, but then they actually voted for him, and in the end he ended up winning the election. So that can definitely skew results, as we saw in that. And then you also want to be careful in how you word the question. It could be really confusing for the person you're surveying, or you could ask leading questions that can cause bias. So for example, if you ask, do you watch cartoons? That's a simple yes or no answer, right? But if you add the word still, do you still watch cartoons? Now you've kind of implied that, wait a minute, I'm too old to watch cartoons, so maybe I should say no. And so you're going to get skewed results. And when you do your survey, you're going to choose one of these four cautions, I guess. And when you write your question, you're going to ask certain people one way, and you're going to ask another way. So, for example, if you had undercoverage, you might ask, in one situation, you might ask only boys. And then in the second situation, you're going to ask boys and girls and see if your results are different. Non-response would probably be kind of difficult. I haven't really thought of a way to do that one, but if you can come up with one and I can approve it, that'd be great. I guess in one situation, you might ask 50 people, and in another situation, you'd have some of those 50 people not respond to your survey and see how the results change. And then response bias. So that could be a situation where in one case, say you're asking people if they think that women that wear makeup are more beautiful. In one case, you might ask people with makeup on, and then you might have one partner ask people without makeup on and see if people thought the person with makeup on was more beautiful. That might have bias in your response, I guess. And then wording of the question, I just gave you an example of if you ask somebody, do you watch cartoons? Versus, do you still watch cartoons? That might cause some bias. If you're still having a struggle with this, I've included a link. This is the link where you can read about it, and there's some videos that you can watch on CK12. And this link is in Canvas if you need to see it. There it is. I was looking for my cursor. Okay, let's see this. So here are some more examples. For example, this guy is asking an opinion poll. So it says, how would you rate the king's job performance? Would you say he's doing a good job, an outstanding job, or a terrific job? Well, obviously all those things say the same thing. And then the people who are being surveyed are like, I think I know who's paying for this poll. Here's another example of giving a leading question where you're kind of looking for a specific response. Given the threat of nuclear war is high now, higher now than it has ever been in human history, and the fact that a nuclear war poses a threat to the very existence of the human race, that should say race, would you favor an all-out nuclear test ban? And so there you're trying to get people to say yes because of all this doom and gloom that's happening, versus just saying, would you favor an all-out nuclear test ban? You might get different results. All right, so I want you to think about that, and you have to think about which one of these four you kind of want to test out. So here's the mini activity on response bias. And so your team is going to design and conduct an experiment to investigate the effects of response bias in surveys. You may choose the topic of your surveys, but you must design your experiment so that it can at least answer one of the following questions. Can the wording of a question create response bias? Do the characteristics of the interviewer create response bias? Does anonymity change the responses to sensitive questions? And does manipulating the answer choices change the response? So we talked about some examples of changing the wording. We talked about an example of the characteristics of the interview, wearing makeup versus not wearing makeup. Anonymity. You say it, and I'll just listen to you say it. So basically what this is saying is, if you ask somebody, let's say, if y'all aren't supposed to be drinking right now, it's illegal. So if you ask somebody, do you drink alcohol? And they're face-to-face to you, or they have to put their name on the survey and say, yes, they drink alcohol, you might get more people lying about that versus saying, don't write your name on the survey. You're going to remain anonymous. Wow, I could say that word. I'm not going to know who you are, but I want to know, do you drink alcohol? All right. And then last, does manipulating the answer choices change the response? So your final product may be either presented as a poster, a report, or a PowerPoint. That's your choice. All right. Here's what it needs to include. This is your criteria for success checklist. First, you need to write a proposal describing the design of your experiment. Be sure to include A, your topic, and which of the questions you're going to try to answer. And that's which of these 4 questions here. Okay. Second, you need to have a detailed description of how you will obtain your subjects. There must be a minimum of 50. Your plan must be practical. So it must be something you can do either within school or out of school. And again, you want to think about how you're going to sample well, using either a simple random sample, a cluster, or a stratified sample. Okay? Then you want to make sure that what your questions are and how you're going to ask them. Are they going to be in paper format? Are you going to just ask somebody in the hallway? You know, how are you going to survey them? And a clear explanation of how you're going to implement your design. And what precautions are you going to take to make sure that you are asking ethical questions and that the data you collect, that you're collecting the data ethically? And if you have questions about that, you can see me on the side. Once I've approved your design, you're going to actually carry out the experiment and record your data in a table. You're going to analyze your data and see what conclusions you can draw from this. You're going to provide the appropriate graphical and numerical evidence to support your answer. You could do a scatter plot, you could do a dot plot, you could do a bar graph, you know, however you want to graphically display your data. And then you're going to prepare a report that includes the data you collected, your analysis from step 3, and a discussion of any problems you encountered and how you dealt with them. And again, that report is going to be written, but it can be included in your PowerPoint or your poster if you choose to do so. So here are some examples that I talked about earlier that were done by some students. So the blue example is makeup. Do you find females who wear makeup attractive? Do you find females who wear makeup attractive is the question. And in one situation, the questioner is wearing makeup, and in the second situation, the questioner is not wearing makeup. And then this was the cartoons question. Do you still watch cartoons? And you can see that less people answered yes to that question because of it. You will also receive this rubric so that you can see how you can get 100 on that project. I learned that from the last project we did. So you can see clearly how I'm going to grade you. All right, good luck. You may choose your groups of, let's say, 3 or 4. 3 or 4. If you want to work with less than 3 people, just let me know. Good luck.